since November 1994. Wow, did I put 1994? 2024. I actually moved to Austin in 1994. I'm pleased to introduce Jennifer Chenoweth, Division Manager of the Austin History Center, and Adam Powell, Executive Director of the Austin History Center Association. The Austin History Center's mission is to procure, preserve, present, and provide the historical records that make up Austin's unique story. Adam joined the Austin History Center Association in 2025. He's worked in mission-focused organizations as a union organizer, school district administrator, state employee, and candidate for local office, and has also been a tech executive at a local startup. He was raised by educators in the suburbs of North Austin and is passionate about giving back to his home community through volunteer work. Jennifer joined the Austin History Center as division manager in November 2024 and oversaw the complex move of the archives from their historic 1933 building to the newly renovated Falk building, the previous site of the Austin Downtown Library. She was instrumental in a once-in-a-generation relocation. She is known for her work at the Oakwood Cemetery Chapel, where she led a groundbreaking project to digitally map Austin's oldest burial site. Her work highlighted the unmarked graves in the historic colored grounds, ensuring the stories of those buried there, many from historically marginalized communities, are preserved. Through oral histories and descendant engagement, she expanded Austin's archival record, brought voices from the past into the present. Beyond her work in historic preservation, she has used visual art as a tool for community connection. She has a career rooted in creativity, history, and civic engagement, and is uniquely positioned to lead the Austin History Center into its next chapter. Not only have they just gone through a major restoration in what was Austin's downtown library, 2026 is the 100th anniversary of their formation. It is a year of centennial celebration. It's an exciting year, and in addition to tonight's lecture, a tour for Westminster is planned for Monday, April 20th. The bus will leave Westminster at 9:30 that morning, so watch for the opportunity to sign up. And now, please join me in welcoming Jennifer and Adam to Westminster.
So before we get started, I want to quickly apologize for the fact that y'all gave us a whole hour to talk. That might be something that y'all regret in terms of how many side stories and tangents Jennifer and I can go on. But also, can y'all give it up for Judy? That was some wonderful introductions. Thank you for doing that.
Would you prefer us on the stage? Can you see us better there?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm hearing yes. Let's do it. Let's do it. Now, realizing before we get too far into this, knowing if any folks have to leave early, we do have something for you. I don't know how many of the events y'all get freebies on the way out, but I'm going to skip really far ahead in the presentation for a moment to, let's see, this map that is also it's in y'all's hallway. So something that our nonprofit and the History Center likes to do is just find ways to get folks engaged in local history. Maps tend to be a great way, so we've recently printed out about 1,000 of these 1873 maps of Austin. We have those on the back table, so please, on your way out, if you have the wall space or want something to scribble on, we always encourage that. Grab yourself a map. We would love for y'all to have that with you.
Or re-gift them to your grandchildren.
That's right. So, to start things off, the difference between the Austin History Center and the association, it's very commonly a super confusing thing. You can best think of our association as the Friends of group. So I have the honor and privilege of serving as executive director. And I say honor and privilege because Austin is home. I was born in Austin, St. David's, grew up in Leander, raised by educators, as Judy mentioned. And so to have the opportunity to get folks excited about and engaged with and really just researching and uncovering stories from Austin's history, is a wonderful, wonderful time. And that also is kind of the categorization of what our nonprofit does. Our job is to be advocates and cheerleaders for and funders and supporters of the Austin History Center itself, Jennifer and her wonderful staff who are preserving and really safeguarding Austin's history for the future. Tell us about the Austin History Center, Jennifer.
Well, we are a division of the Austin Public Library, so we're part of the civil servants that serve the city. We started out as a drawer in the original library, grew to be a room in the original library, and then thanks to the association who advocated to reclaim a whole building for the archives, we became the municipal archives for the city of Austin. So we're part of the Austin Public Library, but we're the archival collections of the city, so we hold the records of the city. And then we also hold all of the archival records of community groups and family stories and maps and photographs. So that if you want to research the history of Austin in minute detail, this is where you go. Does that help? And so you've probably cleaned out a closet or two of stuff and tried to figure out what to keep and what not to keep. We do that professionally. So we work with donors who might have some really fantastic things about your lives, the businesses you've worked in, the community, neighborhoods you've worked in, social groups you've led, organizations, a neighborhood park that you helped. Like all of those things are tell the story of Austin. But then, like, let's say an organization closes or changes, what do you do with those records? You check in with us and you see if we want to keep them. If you have scrapbooks or family photos or things that also tell the story of Austin, those are things we keep too. And some of you may remember that Austin used to have its own MTV or music TV station, and so people went on TV and bands came and played. We have all of those VHS tapes from all of those music performances. We have city council videotapes and audio recordings. We have oral histories of elders in the community that we've interviewed and transcribed. So it's all kinds of different bits of material, and we store it by the type of material, and then we keep notes about what all the subjects are so that we can find all the different topics amongst all the different types of collections, from cassette tapes to pieces of paper. Does that make sense? So we have about a staff of about 18 of us, and most of us consider ourselves archivists. We are archivists. We preserve and share and give access to and digitize records about the city of Austin. But we have grown, which we'll tell you about, and we're becoming an archive within a museum campus, which is very exciting.
Absolutely. Well, you said staff of 18. How many things or documents or files are in the Austin History Center?
Millions. We cannot even count them at this time. Because we can count the name of the record, but that record might have 30 boxes of things in that named record. So we can't, if it's a letter, it's a 4-page letter, that counts as one item. And if there are 5,000 letters in those 20 boxes plus tapes, and so we count it by the collection name. So.
And that's something that, especially on the nonprofit end, we always like to illustrate for folks. Folks often come to us and say, hey, I have this subject I'm curious about, can you research it for us? And I always give a polite but firm no, but we would love to connect you with the resources for you to research it yourself, because it's always a capacity issue. I'll also say that part of the joy of local history and the Austin History Center is that if you're researching a subject, especially in a good amount of depth, and maybe if it's something niche, like, if you're researching the Bat Bridge or Moon Towers, maybe all those leaves have been turned over, but you could very well be looking at something through a lens and finding a story that has never been told before or never been documented or illuminated the way that you will. So, something to just keep in mind. We're going to talk through a lot of stories that have a lot of rabbit holes, but want to encourage y'all, and especially with the online resources for the Austin History Center, to find your own rabbit hole and dig in and enjoy the time.
True, but let's get to know our audience a little bit. So
Yes.
It is important for us to know how to talk to you if we know you a little bit more. So for one, raise your hand if you were born in Austin. Oh, good. We're gonna have some real critics here. Excellent. Raise your hand if you've been here over 40 years. Excellent. All right, they're gonna keep us honest, aren't they?
I love it.
One of the things we help people research a lot is like houses or neighborhoods, who lived in those houses, who built those houses. But we were at another speaking event a couple of weeks ago, and we met people who, one woman named Penny, who was an original employee of IBM in the North Austin complex, and I won't give away your
Yeah, I was
trivia
gonna say,
question.
don't say too much.
But like, she was obviously gonna know the answer to our trivia question because she lived that history. So I'm gonna guess that with all of you who've lived in Austin, the majority of you over 40 years, you are subject matter experts in something, right? And you've probably told all of your friends those stories, but we don't know all those stories. So unless you share them, we don't get the benefit of your point of view and your life experience, and we find that very valuable. So you are a great part of Austin history, and we're excited to talk to you about this work.
Very much so.
What other questions do you have for your audience so that we know how to speak with them?
Well, let's see. Have you ever done research at the Austin History Center? There we go.
Yeah.
And then have you ever, at any point, before or after Austin History Center status, been to the now known as the John Henry Falk Central Library building? There we go. Last one, just because we have to do the original permanent Austin Central Library building was constructed in 1933. Raise your hand if you've been to that one before. I love it. So we're going to be talking about history that you'll have personally witnessed, and we're talking about the evolution of these spaces, but we're going to keep all this in mind.
Great.
So I'm going to start it off, really we're going to be popcorning through this with each other, but why did Austin grow? And when people talk about that nowadays, they're usually talking about this part at the end, right? And I get it, the recent growth, the explosive growth that Austin's experienced. Since I was born here, it's been major, and I understand why that takes a lot of attention. But we like to focus at the History Center on this part as well, and recognizing that the way that I like to put it, Austin becoming the major city, a city of over 1 million people that it is today, was honestly a really exceptionally unlikely sequence of events that got us there. So if we're thinking through, those early years, going from 553 to say like 22,000 and 1900, what are some of the things that got us there, and what are some of the things that later would create this massive, massive growth? I personally think about a few different things represented here by some Austin History Center pictures. So we have a formal trivia section at the end, but for this one you can just tell us out. Can anyone recognize this building on the top left? Say that's a close guess. I see a hand over there too.
The old University Tower.
That's right.
Old Main.
Old Main. Saying that was a really good guess. So it looks like a few different things. So this is the Old Main building of the University of Texas at Austin, established in 1883, and then of course this building would continue on until the 30s when it was torn down to make room for the modern UT Tower and main building and library and all of that infrastructure we know today. Here at the bottom, we have something that is quite literally close to our hearts at the Austin History Center in Wooldridge Square Park. So really that speaks to a legacy in Austin of not just what's happening at the legislature with local government, but with activism, with advocacy, with community involvement. Wooldridge Square Park, we know and understand, was a space that was really the epicenter of so much involvement, community, politicking, what have you, in Austin before the advent of air conditioning. And then folks recognize, hey, let's hop back inside. But it's continued to be an important space. We'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. And then, love this photo of the state capitol getting constructed. And so not talking necessarily about the legislature or what happens at the state capitol, but more so the fact that Austin was actually cemented as the state capitol, which as many of y'all know was very, very far from a sure thing.
Do Do you know what this event is in Woolridge Square? Or do we need to look that up?
I did when I made the slide deck, and I don't remember now. Honesty is very important in these sorts of engagements. I'll remember it later. But so, the way that we like to think of it is Block 101. We'll explain what Block 101 is exactly. But when we talk about the Austin History Center, we're not just talking about the modern documents, we're talking about the literal physical space. There's a strong argument to be made that it really is the home of all of those components of a lot of things that made Austin what it is today, or at the very least, a vessel for us to learn more about the early history of our city. And I will go ahead and say this one is a stretch. I'll come back to it in a bit, the Capitol and Angelina Everly, we'll cover that in a second. But first off, let's orient ourselves here. Jennifer, what are we looking at here?
So in 1839, Edwin Waller created the plan of Austin, and this is the city limits, which is now what you consider downtown. And each of these blocks were numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. So the city blocks and the street grid are pretty consistent to what they are today. There have been a few street closures and a few things that have, alleys that have been closed in because it's a big high rise or something now. But overall, the city grid is still there. And the city planners were planning the capital of the Republic of Texas, its own country, which of course you've studied history. So Texas was its own country. And this was the capital of the country. And so it was a very idealized plan, and they planned out the capital of the country, public squares, and the jail, the courthouse, the penitentiary, something to note, another public square, the university, the high school, and is there anything else? There's another public square there, and then I can't remember quite now what that says, but so it was all kind of a master plan, if you consider that. And it's really, we are right here, the Capitol, this is Woolridge Square. This block right here says churches, and it's enlarged here, churches. And so this is where all the churches were supposed to go, even though there were already a few churches designed other places. So does that help you understand? So the libraries are here in Block 101. Later.
Exactly. So the churches section right here would later become the 1933 permanent Austin Public Library building, and then this residential area here would later become what we now know as the John Henry Falk building. And then circling back to Woolridge Square Park, this public square here, as Jennifer mentioned, there are 4 separate public squares on this original plat of Austin from 1839 when the city was founded, and 2 of them still exist today. Rush Square, oh man, let's get all the way to the end. How did I do that? Rush Square and Republic Square. One is no longer here today, and then Woolridge Square is the only one that has stayed a public square, some sort of initial usage as it was envisioned the entire history of Austin.
Rush Square has a couple of house museums and a park and a fire station. And then Republic Square has, it's more public space, but it has like a big public bathroom, and it's a kind of a bus transit area right there.
It's got a just okay bagel shop.
And then this is Woolridge Square, and you can see the Capitol Square, of course, has been developed into the whole Texas Complex Mall up there.
Yeah. So, that's what we're talking about when we talk about Block 101. Let's go back to this. And this is a stretch, but I want to paint a picture for y'all. I mentioned this earlier. The bottom right here, we have Angelina Everly. Are y'all familiar with the Texas Archive War? One of the most important events in the history of Austin, I would strongly argue. So basically, the city was founded to become the capital of then the Republic of Texas. Then there was a change in the presidency of the Republic of Texas to some guy, y'all may or may not have heard of him, Sam Houston. And here's a detail about Sam Houston, which I have to say to me is one of the most infinitely interesting figures, not just in Texas history, but American history. Just wonderfully interesting to learn about. The thing that a lot of folks don't realize is that Houston was named after Houston when he was alive. I can only imagine what that would do to my ego. If there was like Powelltown or Adamtown, I can only imagine. So there was some level of advocacy on his point of, hey, like, okay, I don't know about this Austin thing. You know, there's Washington on the Brazos. There's his namesake city. There was a conversation. I see a hand.
When was Austin built under Waterloo?
Yeah, so well, Jennifer would be better answer than I can.
1836 was commonly called Waterloo, and it was renamed Austin in 1839, so it wasn't very long.
That's right.
And if you remember that population grid, there were really like maybe 40 family groups here then.
That's right.
In the 1836 kind of time period.
Tiny, tiny, tiny. And so when we're talking the Texas Archive War, 1841, right?
42.
42, jeez. Okay, I'm off on the dates. So 42. So there was basically an armed group of folks coming to Austin, and they wanted to take the source of power, the piece of legitimacy that made our city the capital of then the country of Texas. And that thing was the archives.
The records.
That's right.
Including that map and all the things that would have said the capital's here because the office is here, right? And so you all worked in offices. What matters is everything you do in that office, all those records. So they came to collect the archives and move them to Houston because Sam Houston didn't want his capital of when he was president to be in Austin. He wanted it to be in Houston. And with that, a bunch of settlers whose economies were built around the capital got up and moved to Houston, so the population dipped there for a minute. And then this lady was...
Angelina Bell Peyton Everly.
Thank you. And she was a innkeeper.
Well,
right?
I was going to say, excuse my French, a total badass. She was amazing. She wasn't just an innkeeper, she was a fantastic innkeeper. She went through trials and tribulations in her life. She moved to Texas with her husband. Her husband died, and she started an initial inn outside of Austin, a different city, with her husband. She was a business owner, ran it well, and then by the time she came to Austin, she had a different husband, but she wasn't just an innkeeper, she was the innkeeper. A hilarious perfect circle in this story is that Sam Houston, when he visited Austin, stayed at the Everly Inn. That's where he wanted to go because she had the best food, best accommodations. She knew what she was doing as an innkeeper. And she also, to me, though she wasn't born and raised in Austin, whatever that means, she is the truest of Austinites in recognizing the source of power of the city. And so they came to grab the records, to grab the archives, the thing that made Austin legitimate as the state capital. And she famously fired a cannon shot and roused the resistance and the citizens to eventually basically go back up and grab the records, keep them in Austin, and maintain our city as the state capital.
I like to think of her as the "Don't touch my Austin. Don't do it." We're here to protect it. We love our city. We love the idea that this is where the heart of Texas is, and we're going to keep it. So, love her.
And I don't need to say, going back to the population graph, how much Austin would have stayed on this end had it not been established and validated and continually validated as the country and then later the state's capital. So that's one turn. We avoided the wrong one because of the heroic actions of this woman here and the Austinites of the time. Now, I mentioned that component was a bit of a stretch. These two are not such a stretch in how they apply to Block 101, the modern day site of the Austin History Center. So we're going to talk about a couple of these components. I'm going to shift it to Jennifer because she really has studied a lot of this history super well. But a lot of it comes back to this man, who to me, and I'll say personally as a black Austinite, this is hero of heroes. If I could build an Austin Mount Rushmore, he would be on it, I promise. Who is Reverend Jacob Fontaine?
Well, he was born enslaved in other southern states and was brought to Austin, maybe with the Mirabeau Lamar expedition, because he was enslaved by Fontaine, who was the Reverend of St. David's Church. He could read and write, and so he later became the sexton of the church once that church opened. But they came with Mirabeau Lamar on that trip, and they camped at Harold's Cabin, which is at the site of the downtown library, and where on that map it had square for the penitentiary. So like, really right where Shoal Creek met Colorado, Lower Colorado River. So maybe one of the first, we don't have exact documentation, maybe one of the first enslaved people brought into Austin proper for a visit and then was brought back here to live. And then he worked for the Episcopal Church, but he was Baptist and he attended the Baptist church just a couple blocks away, but of course it was segregated and they sat in the balcony. And he was one of the kind of leaders of the enslaved population communities, really well respected. Like I said, he was literate. But it was a growing city, and we had a pretty big population of enslaved people at that time because we were made to be a republic or its own country for the point of legalizing slavery for people moving across to Texas to get land grants from the American South. So,
It's also worth just to pop right for a moment, worth mentioning too that the impact of the Civil War and the fact there was not basically any bloodshed here in Austin meant that many folks who were enslavers, who were slave owners, came to the Austin area with their enslaved individuals. The famous stat is in 1870, Austin was about 36 or 37% African American as a result of that migration to the city.
once emancipated after the Civil War, people moved to cities to try and find their lost relatives. And Austin had a big freedmen's community. We call them freedom colonies now. But he was emancipated when he was 57, which is my age. And after that, he got busy. He became ordained as a Baptist preacher. He married 111 couples because marriage was illegal if you were enslaved. He founded the first black newspaper west of the Mississippi called the Gold Dollar, which was named so because his sister had saved up a gold coin to send him to start his businesses. And with that newspaper, you put in ads looking for your lost relatives of people who had been separated for maybe their whole lives. And then he founded 6 black Baptist churches. He helped one of the founders of the St. John Missionary Baptist Association, which is a multi-county Baptist association of churches, which is still going today. And the St. John neighborhood in Austin by Highland Mall, that association owned 300 acres of land.
I gotta hop in on this too, because this could be a form of a trivia question.
Yeah.
So, y'all know ACC Highland, Highland Mall. If you're like me, you remember going there back in the day. It was not my favorite mall, I was more of a Lakeline guy. Can anyone say what was on that land before Highland Mall? And this is some niche history. So, in line with what Jennifer was saying, there was an orphanage. And specifically, in line with the St. John Baptist Association, Ripley Baptist Association, and the revivals that would happen in that area, we're talking about, I'm not going to pull up the population graph again, but a time when Austin had, in the early 20th century, about 15 to 20,000 people in it. There was about 10,000 folks that would come from all across the state for this Baptist Association. And revival, communities.
Camp Revival in the month of July, the whole month.
The month of July.
Still Texas, still that same July.
Pre-automobile.
Yeah. And
They would come from across the state.
Yeah, and so it was a quiet time in agriculture because the crops were, it was hot. We have a spring and a fall season. And so they would come and practice their faith there. They built this beautiful big orphanage that was also a school and a boarding house. It was really amazing. And then the first Black Baptist church he helped build is that building right there on our Block 101 square. It was not the most elegant building, it was a little humble, but it got the job done, and he was the pastor there till 1885. And then later the church got moved 5 or 6 different times due to gentrification and growth. They'd get kicked out of one spot, developers would come, need it for something else. church has moved several times, but it still exists. And we did a whole kind of map study of where all those churches moved. So this is the north half of this block that Reverend Fontaine was part of. This was the Swedish Lutheran Church when it was built. And the building that was here was even more humble than either of those two, and it was Metropolitan AME Church, which was another black church. It burned the same year the Capitol burned, and they rebuilt this structure here with bricks from the Capitol building.
Which, to clarify, we're talking the predecessor Capitol building that burned in 1881.
Yeah.
It had a shell left remaining, so the bricks were able to be repurposed. It didn't burn to the ground.
And so when we talk about the here's Wooldridge Square, it's right here. It's this empty space here. And then there are 4 historic houses that are on the south half of the block. That's the edge of the first one. And the Falk Library, which many of you have visited, is now on the south half of that block. And my office would be about right there.
My office is just
So
a little bit
it's really
taller.
changed, right?
She's on the 3rd floor, I'm on the 4th floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a view close to the Capitol, looking southwest toward the river. And this is a zoom in of this picture, but look across the river how little few buildings were over there on the south side.
I have to say, growing up in Leander, this is still how I envision South Austin. I don't know that anything's past the river. It's been unimportant to me my whole life. I love South Austin. Apologies to South Austin. I'll also say, to linger on something you said too, that I love about this photo, this era, and that you can see actually the maps that, again, you can grab on your way out from 1873. She said river, and that is accurate. This was not a lake. It's, for folks who don't know the water history, they gave us too much. I'm going on a tangent. I'm going to do it. The waterway history, to me, so unbelievably impactful for Austin, because Austin has always been naturally, geographically, very, very flood prone. And if y'all think it's bad today, which my wife and I's house backs up to Shoal Creek, we do think it's pretty bad today, it used to be far, far, far worse. And so at this era, you see, not only is it a river, you also see with the supports on this early Congress Bridge, you can really see the ground there. It was nowhere near as deep as it would become later on with multiple dammings. So in the 1873 map, which actually, if we get out of here, let me just skip ahead. I feel like I've spoiled most of the presentation doing that, so thanks for working with it. Down here, you'll see in more detail in the map that you grabbed today, you have wagons and a guy on a horse fording through the river. So it really illustrates, when it flooded in Austin, it flooded all of the modern downtown area in a really intense way. And that would come to pass in 1900. So 1895, the city of Austin went to the voters and said, hey, we need to build a dam, right? We need it, first off, to power this newfangled electricity thing. We got these moon towers, we imported them, we need something to give them the juice. So hydroelectric energy. Also, flood control, right? They knew this was a problem, they maybe didn't know how much of a problem it would be, but we have to remember that in 1895, the feds weren't building dams, the state wasn't building dams on behalf of cities. If the city wanted a dam, they needed to build it. So the vote passed, the city went into a lot of debt. Thankfully cities don't do that anymore, so that's of the past. But the city went into a lot of debt, but it was for the return of the electricity, the flood control was something that was a big community good. It was a granite dam, and then in 1900, there was a massive, massive flood that killed dozens of people and destroyed the dam. Completely destroyed it. That also, to me, total sidebar, wasn't planned to include this, but I love this story. That also, to me, was another huge turning point in Austin's history, because we had Austin Water, Austin Energy established through the construction of that dam, publicly owned utilities, which nowadays make up the broad financial stack of our city's financial infrastructure, massively, right? It funds basically, in some way, shape, or form, everything that the city does in terms of core services. At that point in time, when it flooded, it didn't seem like it was a good idea to keep the publicly owned utilities. The city was in debt. There were private companies who were knocking on the door saying, hey, we can provide the energy, we can do this, and you just got to sign this over. And I'm still shocked and awed that the city council and mayor, for years to come after that flood, made the decision, nope, we're going to weather the storm, we're going to contract with y'all, but we're not going to sell off the utilities. That's another thing where, again, the financial infrastructure of our city would look majorly different. And as you all know, it wouldn't be until, I believe it was 1941, the Tom Miller Dam coming in as part of the Highland Lake system, and then 1960, the Longhorn Dam, which truly, finally, turned the river into a lake. I didn't plan on saying that, but hopefully you'll find that a little interesting. Jennifer, where were we?
You asked about Reverend Fontaine, and he just contributed so much to Austin. And so we just really wanted to give you a sense of this block, but I want to talk a little bit more about these structures. So Metropolitan AME eventually bought out this small congregation, the Swedish Lutheran Church, because they built a bigger church elsewhere. And they used this as the black high school for the freedom settlements that were over here off of Wood Street and part of Clarksville. I don't think Clarksville had its own school, it had its own
I think it's part of
church.
Clarksville. Yeah.
So students walked over here and attended this as the black high school. And in this building, Paul Quinn College was founded. Paul Quinn College is no longer in Austin, but it still exists, and it is the first HBC, historically black college. We usually say HBCU, but they weren't used in HBC in Texas. And that kind of kicked off a whole thought that other HBCs could be founded in Texas, because we had a really interesting and rich black community at the time. And so Tillotson was the next college that was founded. And after that, Samuel Houston College. And after that, UT. And Jacob Fontaine was one of the people who campaigned statewide when he went to do Baptist evangelical work across the state to lobby that Austin should be the home of the University of Texas. He was really foundational in getting that vote passed. So he really, really had a lot of effect in his life on who we are today. So the activities that happened here are like really quite a big deal. And Metropolitan AME is now on East 11th Street. And when the city of Austin was planning to build the library there, that was then the last structure there. And they petitioned to get to, when the city bought the land from them, they petitioned to keep the bricks in the building, and they deconstructed it and took the bricks to East Austin. And the bricks on the current Metropolitan AME building came from there, which came from the Capitol building.
A legacy going back to that 1881 fire. I see it.
When did they put the first train station here?
1871.
1871.
They meant to build it before the Civil War, but the Civil War canceled all plans. And it took till 1871 that the train came here from Galveston and Houston, which meant Galveston was the port for immigration. And then you didn't have to, which some Swedish immigrants did, walk overland from Galveston with your suitcase or
For the
take a
record,
stagecoach.
I would not do that.
Yeah, and that's how they discovered the Swedish immigration to Austin, discovered rattlesnakes. There's all kinds of interesting writings from that group. But as European immigrants came, that's how they came. And so the city of Austin itself commissioned its own census in 1875, because within 4 years the population had just boomed with all these people talking all these different languages. And the city was like, who are all these people? So they did an ethnographic census and really drilled down on every person here and where they were from. So we have some really good data just about that, because that's the answer they were looking for from everybody is, what's your cultural heritage? How'd you get here? And so that's a little bit different than the general census that happens on the 0 decades.
Yes. I also have to say, while we're talking railroad history, a lot of folks don't realize it shaped far more than just Austin. Leander, for example, exists as it does today because of the Austin Northwestern Railroad. Now that came later, we're talking 1880s. But you know, they were building a railroad, out to this beautiful pink granite dome, this natural feature, basically specific more or less just to Texas. And I'm not talking Enchanted Rock, I'm talking about Granite Mountain, which if you look at historic pictures, basically looks the exact same as Enchanted Rock. It's a spinning image. It's the same sort of pink granite dome. So the people who own that land were kind of sitting there saying, okay, the dome is awesome. We would like to make money now. So the way to make money is get the railroad out there. And as they were building what we now know is the state capitol, they didn't love the look of white limestone on the exterior. They were looking for something different in the construction. So the landowners of the pink granite dome approached the state. They came up with a deal of, okay, y'all can have as much pink granite for free as you would like. Mine the dome, do whatever you want with it, but you have to build the railroad out to transport it. So that's why even to this day, when you're going along the route of what is now the Cap Metro Red Line, it is that same route, it is those same rails. I mean, ship of Theseus, they probably changed and adapted the rails over here, but that exact same route, you will see occasionally giant pink granite blocks along that railway, because when trains tipped over and the pink granite blocks fell off, they got the things for free. That was not a problem. Get it back on the tracks, go get another block. So, I bring this up too, selfishly, because Leander, named after Leander Brown, who was a member of the board of the Austin Northwestern Railway, never actually lived in Leander, but they named the town after him as they platted it. Cedar Park had a past name for the first 5 years of its history. Cedar Park was called Brugerhof. And Brugerhof was a gentleman who was on the Austin Northwestern Railroad Board. So I could keep talking about this, and I won't, but Elgin, Manor, Cedar Park, Llano, Marble Falls all have deep, deep, deep ties to Austin Railroad history and really formed the whole metropolitan area that we know and love today. Listen, they give us the time, I'm doing sideways.
We should advance the slide, or we could.
We probably should. But I think to linger and really emphasize Jennifer's point here, this is a man who established a newspaper to help people do what he did, which was find his family after slavery. This was a man who campaigned statewide and locally here in Austin to have a university here that we must imagine he was well aware that he himself and probably his kids, and ultimately, as we know, it'd be his kids' kids that maybe would have an opportunity to actually attend it, because he knew it was what was best for Austin. Selflessness, service, and to me, one of the most legendary Austinites of all time. It's amazing stuff.
Similar view from the last picture, but these are the two other buildings we've been talking about. So this is the 1933 first permanent building for the Austin Public Library that many of you have visited. And this is the 1979 building that has been dedicated to John Henry Falk. And that is now our two-building campus. But the surrounding buildings don't look like that anymore, do they? This picture is not that old. This picture, which blows my mind, is from 2010.
Which somehow was 16 years ago.
2010. Like, if you were at this bird's eye view point of this photo, it's all the view behind it is blocked by high rises now. Except for that you can still see the Lamar Bridge because it's there it is, the Capitol view.
Right up there in the top right corner.
Yeah. So that is still a Capitol view. So if you're on that bridge, you can see the top of this building right underneath the Capitol. But everything else is just high rises.
Right over there, I think that library, we've been to it, the newest, and it's right near where Amtrak comes in and
Yes.
out.
Yep.
That old Missouri Pacific Station was built in the late 40s.
That's right, that's right.
It's just south of that right there.
Yep, and I've ridden Amtrak and still do sometimes, and that was the last station. They had them at 3rd in Congress, 2 of them, but after the tech special, when they knocked down the old station, the old Katy station, and Southern Pacific 92 in old 1888
That's right.
was finally, when they moved to that station in 1949 on the Missouri Pacific, then they finally tore it down by 1955. It was near an old express office. I think I may have seen it in its last days.
I gotta say too, I'm so glad you mentioned that. So for those who might not have been able to hear, we're talking about two historic train depots that were downtown, predecessors to the modern Amtrak station. And those to me are one of the lost architectural treasures of Austin. When you look back in early 20th century postcards, for example, like yeah, they have the Capitol, right? They have Old Main, or a little bit later, the UT Tower. They also had those train depots. They were big pieces of infrastructure, and frankly, a bit of a loss for the city.
Do you know we've already been talking 45 minutes though?
Oh my God. Okay, yeah. Let's wrap it up.
All right, so let's go on. Let's talk about this just a little bit. So it's the library centennial. So we've been talking all about this like 1800s history. We didn't have a library until 1926. Wow. Boo. And we, of course, UT had a library. And as the artist Elizabeth Ney said, we don't need a permanent public library because no one's ever been turned away from the UT library. Well, she was a woman of agency. And maybe she hadn't been turned away from the library, but you couldn't have said that about everybody. And so Mayor Wooldridge had campaigned for a library for decades, but it was low down on the city needs, including a dam and water and trains and all of these things. But finally, a wife of a professor, he got hired at Austin, and the family moved to Austin, and she arrived to discover in 1926 that we had no library. And back then, coeducation was not common, and she was a member of the American Association of University Women, because women had to campaign to get to go to college. And so she got here and was like, I don't think so. How are people going to be literate? How are we going to raise our children? And so she got busy, and that association did a campaign for a book and $1. And they started with a rented room on Congress Avenue on the second floor above a print shop at 819 Congress. And the library was there for a little bit with the donated books. And then they built a wood building. In 1926, it opened in December on 9th and Guadalupe, and it was the first semi-permanent library. And then while they built this is facing Guadalupe, and that's the moon tower that's still there. They moved this building literally into the street until they got it and picked it up and moved it to East Austin, where it sits on Angelina Street. It's functioning now. It started its function as the first segregated colored branch library in East Austin, because everything was segregated. And they moved it there, and it opened in 1933. It's now clad in brick. And then when the city built, it's right there, and when the city built a new Carver Library branch, it's adjacent to the south in the 70s. And then later they built the Carver Museum Complex. When that was the library, this became the Carver Museum, and then they built this Carver Museum Complex, and this is part of the complex, is the Genealogy Center, so it's still there.
The amount of folks I know who have walked into that building not realizing what it was, it's amazing that we still have it.
Yeah. So.
I keep popcorn and personal things. Again, for me, I remember the first time I saw this picture, I almost broke down in tears, because there's the temporary library that would become the colored branch. Right here is the closest entrance to what was my office when I started at the association. This is the windows of what is now the O. Henry room. And that was unbelievable to me, that officing in a place that for a couple decades I wouldn't have been able to go to. So, full of full circle moments in Austin history.
So a little bit more just briefly about the history of the library. We were the first city department to desegregate in 1951.
That was very ahead of the curve.
Because William Astor Kirk was a political science professor at Houston Tillotson then college, and he had his students study the laws that enforce segregation, and they could not find any laws but only customs, and they challenged the library department to change, and the library department said, this is just what we do. And so they went to city council, and Emma Long said, we're gonna do this. And so in December of 1951, the library is desegregated because clearly that big 1933 building and that little building were not equal. They were separate, but they were not equal. And then in 1955, they got air conditioning, both of them. And that changed children's lives, because then children had somewhere to go in the summer and learn to read. So we are a college town, we are a literate town, we are an educated town, and lots of people have been working really hard to protect that. Well, before we move on to what we're doing now, and we only have a few minutes left, and thank you for your time and your interest and your consideration and patience. Do you have any questions about the stuff in the past? Because you can tell Adam and I could talk for 3 hours straight about many topics. I could talk for 3 hours straight about women's history. Like, there's just so much richness to our culture. And how I describe our culture is the flavor. You could have many kitchens with the same ingredients in it, but the cook and how they put those ingredients together is the flavor. You might cook something for your grandkids and only you can cook it that way. No one can cook Texas sheet cake like my grandmother. I have a neighbor who will do it for me, but it is not the exact same. And so we are the particular flavor that is Austin, and we're working really, really hard to care about it, to collect it, preserve it, and study it and share it, because this is our home, and home means something particular, and we belong here, and we have to really, really care about it for it to last. Because with that growth, and the people coming here that are new, or your kids or your great-grandkids, you know, often people start to care about genealogy when they're 50 or 60, and wish that they still had their grandparents here to tell those stories that they forgot. So we want to help you figure out how to tell the story of Austin, to preserve that flavor in a way that gets the young people, my lovely daughter is here in the back, on her wonderful phone, that is the entertainment device, to care about history, right? That's kind of a challenge, because they have if you're all using the phone, you have a shorter attention span than you used to. So how are we going to talk about this in the future? So if you will advance a few slides.
Can I also pause for a moment?
Yeah.
Can we please applaud Jennifer for a moment? She's unbelievable. I would say it makes my job so easy to be leading a nonprofit, supporting her as leader and her wonderful staff.
So we have a couple programs we're working on launching, is so that we can empower you as subject matter experts for a topic that you've already known, researched, or lived. Share it with us, and we help publish it digitally as an online exhibit, and we're calling it Local Historians. Also, you know, all these UT professors have their students do these amazing projects and they never go anywhere. So it's a way to get these things collected and published. So it's storytelling, so that how we kind of collect our local history. So that's one of the projects with the association that we're launching this year.
Absolutely. Because it's, again, going back to what we said earlier, millions of documents, 18 staff. Our nonprofit has 2 staff. So it has been, it's a tragedy to lose archival materials themselves. It's also a tragedy for someone to have spent dozens or hundreds or thousands of hours of research, uncover those stories, and that not be preserved for the future.
Yeah. So then this technology component. So I bet some of you still drive around on your phones and you have a map on your car dashboard, and it has a model that looks kind of like that you're driving past. That's Google Earth and or Apple Maps, and they've kind of made a rough, what we call a digital twin. It's just a volumized set of buildings you know when you're going over a bridge or river where to turn left. But it gives you a little picture of this. That's actually a very complicated thing. This is that of the history of Austin. So this is looking from the Capitol south toward the river, similarly to the way this photo does it. So I have trouble explaining this to tech people, but for those of us who are not as sophisticated as some of our even children and grandchildren are. We basically taken the historic maps, information about the buildings, and we're building a historic version of this that will actually have all the pictures of those buildings plastered on that, and then use computer modeling to rebuild the factual model of Austin's architectural environment. And then we're digitizing the city directories to put the people in the houses, the churches, the businesses, and the buildings and the schools, so that we can do storytelling in that, kind of like a gaming environment, so that we can get our kids and grandkids excited about the place and the flavor that is Austin.
That's right.
And how we got here.
Well, we've talked today about multiple buildings that are gone. UT Maine, the train depots that we were mentioning earlier. Nothing we can do is going to bring them back. But,
That's a parking lot.
yep, nothing we can do can bring them back, but if we can bring them back digitally, print those out as 3D models even, tell the stories of who worked at those train depots, who were those early UT staff members, we'll get as close as we can.
So, is this time for the map giveaway?
I think it is time. Well, that's technically. I should say you'll see it as you walk out. The maps are on the right. We also have a quick little pamphlet of our association, what we do. We're small but mighty, and do just want to say it makes a huge difference if you're looking for philanthropic opportunities to support the work that we're doing. The money that comes to us goes to Jennifer and her staff. So just have to say that.
Projects to get stuff done. And if you have volunteer time, we really, really rely on our volunteers. All right,
Very much.
quick bit of trivia before you kick us out of the room.
Haha, yes. And then if we have time for some Q&A, or also Jennifer and I can stick around for a second. Well, Jennifer's here with her kid. I can definitely stick around longer. So, we're going to do this by a show of hands. Y'all know Dean Keaton Street, right? I'm going to hope nobody else heard that. Is the Dean in Dean Keaton Street a first name or a last name? Raise your hand if you think it's a first name.
Or a title, first name or a title.
First name, oh, sorry, first name or a title. I'm hearing everyone, yeah, so it is a title. I always thought it was a first name. In fact, the individual is Werdner Page Keaton. He was the dean of the School of Law for well over 25 years, and his daughter's probably more famous than he was, because his daughter, Carol Keaton, who only relatively recently passed away, she was the only mayor that was a woman in Austin's history.
So far.
So far. That's right. So this one's a little more specific, and that's why I had to stop Jennifer earlier. I'm like, oh, easy on the IBM history. So the area, now known as the Domain, as many of y'all know, was originally a large IBM campus. You know, we're talking about early Austin history with the tech sector. It's more the hardware than the software. So can anyone tell me, when that campus was established in the late 1960s, what lucrative piece of technology did IBM manufacture on that site? PC, that's a good guess, not that.
Before PCs.
Typewriters, that's right.
Which
Can anyone
one?
tell me the brand name? Selectric. Selectric typewriters.
Literally, ding!
I love to say that because my wife and I live in North Shoal Creek, and that is a neighborhood that exists because they needed places for the typewriter factory workers to live. Thank goodness, it's the best neighborhood in Austin. I'm a little biased. And we had, before Bergstrom changed from an Air Force base into an airport, there were a few locations, really two primary locations that were considered to replace the Mueller Airport, or the Miller Airport. So I heard one was Manor. That's the thing, there was actually an election that passed, and the residents of Manor were not super happy about it. It did not work out, but Manor was extremely heavily considered. There was another option being considered, and I'll phrase it this way, it was in tandem with another city. That's right, that's right. So there was a lot of conversation of making a joint Austin-San Antonio airport. The backstory on this is Bergstrom, as a federal Army and then later Air Force base, there was an understanding, we should say, with the city that, you know, the city did own the land, the city could take the land back. When it came time for the city to say, hey, can we make this the airport? The feds were maybe not super excited to do so. Eventually, that all worked out. The Manor idea, the San Antonio idea, got scratched. And then with that, that is all that we have now. I want to just mention again, hope you'll head to, it's pretty simple, austinhistory.org for our nonprofits website, austinhistorycenter.org for the History Center website itself. Jennifer, what are some of the resources on that website, on Austin History Center?
Well, if you don't like to drive downtown and try and park, surprisingly, we have thousands and thousands of photos and documents and articles and exhibits online. So you can look up all kinds of things from maps to photos to oral histories to stories, and it's all something you can play on your computer, or you could get one of the fabulous young people in your life to help you with that.
That's right. Like the whole Statesman Archive going back to 1871. You can just search on it.
Yeah.
And so many other things there. Again, for those looking for volunteer opportunities, always needs for volunteers, whether that's in the archive sorting through collections, serving as a docent to welcome people into the space and the exhibits, extremely important.
Or here at your home.
That's right.
So we really are hopeful that you will come visit us on this bus tour to our campus, and we're going to walk you around and show you some things. And the current big exhibit we have on our first floor is called Unboxing the Archive, which explains what an archive does and what we particularly do as an archive. And you're going to be like, oh, this is a big museum space. But then you're going to think, oh, they're also going to reopen that whole building next door as a whole museum soon. Well, city budget cuts, it's happening, just a little not quite as quickly as we'd like. But soon you'll be able to have a whole new destination for sharing that flavor of Austin with your family, holiday trips and vacations and stuff to do downtown. It won't just be to drive around and look at the skyscrapers we don't feel comfortable walking into, but it's to walk into Austin's history home. So we look forward to having you.
We love the Bullock, we love the LBJ Library, we love the Neil Cochran House Museum, all the other great folks. But I think we can all agree Austin needs more museums. We're working on it.
We live in Texas, right? Texas. The Bullock is only 25 years old. Do you realize we didn't have a Texas History Museum? So it is about time for an Austin History Center. So.
That's right.
Well, thank you both, we really appreciate it. And it's April 20th, the special tour for Westminster, the bus will be taking up, so what's April 20th.
That's right. But we're going to stick around for some Q&A. Please grab a map. And thank you all so much for learning about Austin history with us.